Most treatments of creative thinking focus on technique, brainstorming methods, lateral thinking exercises, the conditions under which ideas arrive. These are not useless, but they address the surface of a problem whose roots go considerably deeper. The Stoics understood something about creative thinking that the modern creativity industry has almost entirely missed, that the limits of a person's thinking are not primarily technical. They are personal. They are set by the character of the thinker, by the assumptions they have never examined, by the fears they have arranged their life to avoid. The 6 truths that follow are not tips for generating more ideas. They are a challenge to the person doing the generating, to the quality of attention, the willingness to sit with difficulty, and the kind of character from which genuinely original thought becomes possible. The Stoics did not set out to build a philosophy of creative thinking, but in building a philosophy of clear seeing, that is exactly what they produced. Welcome to Logostoic. In today's video, we are going to examine 6 Stoic truths about creative thinking that go deeper than any technique, truths that reshape not just how you think, but who is doing the thinking. If content like this challenges how you see yourself, consider subscribing to Logostoic and turning on notifications. Now let's begin. Truth 1. Constraints do not limit creative thinking, they focus it. When Seneca was exiled to Corsica by the Emperor Claudius, he lost almost everything that had defined his life in Rome: his influence, his social world, his access to the libraries and conversations that had fed his intellectual work. By any conventional measure, the exile should have been the end of his productive life. Instead, it became one of his most generative periods. Stripped of distraction and forced into the simplicity of island life, he wrote with a depth and clarity that his more comfortable years in Rome had not produced. The Stoics understood this not as an accident, but as a principle. Unlimited resources, unlimited time, unlimited options, unlimited access do not liberate creative thinking. They diffuse it. The mind that can do anything tends to do nothing in particular with real commitment. Constraints force a confrontation with what actually matters, and that confrontation is where original thought begins. Practical application. Deliberately impose one constraint on your next creative project: a time limit, a material restriction, a rule about what you cannot use. Notice what the constraint forces you toward that freedom would have let you avoid. Truth 2. Boredom is not the enemy of creative thinking, it is its birthplace. Epictetus taught that one of the primary failures of undisciplined people is the inability to be alone with themselves, the constant need to fill silence with noise, to replace stillness with activity, to escape the mild discomfort of an unoccupied mind. He saw this not as a preference but as a form of cowardice, the refusal to sit with the self long enough to find out what is actually there. Creative thinking requires exactly the space that most people are now structurally prevented from accessing. The mind that is always stimulated, always receiving input, always processing something that arrived from outside, never generates the connections that only arise in genuine quiet. Boredom is not the absence of thinking. It is the condition under which the mind, having run out of external material, begins to work on its own. That is where the original ideas come from. Not from more input, but from the digestion of what is already there. Practical application. Protect one 20-minute window each day from all incoming information. No phone, no audio, no deliberate task. Let the mind wander without direction. The discomfort you feel in those first minutes is the sound of creative thinking beginning to work. Truth 3. Original creative thinking is built from absorbed influences, not invented from nothing. In the first book of his Meditations, Marcus Aurelius does something that no other ancient ruler's private journals do. He lists, with specific gratitude, the precise quality he learned from each person who shaped him. From his grandfather, good temper and meekness. From his father's memory, modesty and a manly character. From his first teacher, endurance of labor. From the philosopher Rusticus, the concept that his character needed improvement and discipline. The list goes on for pages. What Marcus was describing, without naming it, is the actual mechanism of creative thinking, the deliberate absorption of diverse influences, consciously processed and selectively retained, until they combine into something that is recognizably your own. Original thought is not thought that comes from nowhere. It is thought that has digested so many sources so completely that the sources are no longer visible in the output. The Stoics called this the difference between imitation and formation. You imitate until the material becomes yours, and then you stop imitating and start creating. Practical application. Identify 3 people whose quality of thinking you want to develop. Study how they approach problems, not what they concluded, but how they reasoned. Absorb the method, not the answer. Truth 4. The obstacle does not block creative thinking, it redirects it. Marcus Aurelius wrote what has become one of the most quoted observations in the Stoic tradition. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is usually read as a statement about resilience, about continuing despite difficulty. But it is also, at its core, a principle of creative thinking. Every obstacle is a forced reframe. It compels you to approach the problem from a direction you would not have chosen freely, and that unwanted approach is frequently where the original solution lives. The person who encounters an obstacle and immediately looks for a way around it is not being creative. They are being persistent. The person who asks what the obstacle itself is telling them about the problem has entered the territory of genuine creative thinking. The block is not the enemy of the solution. It is frequently the solution's most useful clue. Practical application. The next time you hit a wall on a project, before looking for a way around it, spend 10 minutes asking what the wall is revealing. What does this obstacle make visible about the problem that you had not seen before? Truth 5. Solitude is active creative work, not its absence. Cato the Younger had a habit that his contemporaries noted with a mixture of admiration and bafflement. At social gatherings where other men drank and talked, he would frequently be found reading in a corner. Not as rudeness, as practice. He understood that the quality of his thinking depended on the quality of his private engagement with ideas, and that no amount of social stimulation could substitute for the work done alone. Solitude is widely misunderstood as the passive state of being without other people. The Stoics understood it as the active state of being with your own mind, and treating that encounter with the same seriousness you would bring to any demanding conversation. Creative thinking does not happen in spite of solitude. It happens in it. The connections, the unexpected combinations, the questions that disrupt comfortable assumptions, these arrive in stillness, in the sustained presence with a problem that the noise of social life perpetually prevents. Practical application. Schedule 1 hour each week for what you might call creative solitude, not rest, not entertainment, but deliberate engagement with one question or problem you have been carrying. Bring something to write with. Bring nothing else. Truth 6. Your character sets the ceiling of your creative thinking. This is the Stoic truth about creative thinking that almost no one discusses, and it is the most important one. The quality of a person's thinking is not limited primarily by their intelligence or their knowledge or their technique. It is limited by the quality of their character, by what they are willing to see, by what they have the courage to follow, by the fears and desires and unexamined assumptions that invisibly constrain every problem they approach. A person who needs approval cannot produce thinking that risks disapproval. A person who fears being wrong cannot follow an argument to its genuine conclusion. A person whose identity depends on a particular worldview cannot think clearly about evidence that challenges it. Epictetus understood this as the foundational problem of most human reasoning. The mind does not operate in a vacuum. It operates through a person, and the person's character either opens the thinking or forecloses it. This is why the Stoics treated the development of character not as a separate project from intellectual development, but as its precondition. Practical application. Identify one belief you hold about your field, your life, or yourself that you have never seriously questioned. Not to abandon it, to examine it. The willingness to question your most comfortable assumptions is where the ceiling of your creative thinking begins to rise. These 6 truths do not make creative thinking easier. They make it more honest. They locate the actual source of original thought, not in technique, not in inspiration, but in the quality of the person doing the thinking and the conditions they are willing to create for themselves. The Stoics were not trying to build creative thinkers. They were trying to build clear-eyed, disciplined, honest human beings. And they discovered, in the process, that those qualities produce exactly the kind of thinking that most people are trying to manufacture through methods. The ceiling of your creative thinking is not set by your talent. It is set by your character. And character, as the Stoics understood, is something you build, one honest choice at a time. The ceiling of your creative thinking is set by your character, not your talent, not your technique. That is the sentence I hope stays with you, because it means the work of becoming a better thinker and the work of becoming a better person are not separate projects. They are the same project. If something in today's video changed the angle from which you see your own thinking, consider liking this video, because this kind of challenge, the kind that locates the problem inside the thinker rather than in their tools, deserves to reach the people who are ready to hear it. Every like extends that reach. And leave a comment. Write down which of these 6 truths is the one you most need to sit with right now, and why. Because creative thinking, in the Stoic sense, begins with honest self-examination. The person you want to become is not waiting for better ideas. They are waiting for a clearer look at the assumptions that are limiting the ones you already have. Subscribe to Logostoic and turn on notifications, because the work of developing this kind of thinking is not completed in a single conversation. We will keep going together. May you think with the full honesty of what you actually know, and the full courage of what you have not yet allowed yourself to see. The thinking you are capable of is larger than you have so far permitted.